The Heron and the Hummingbird. There was once a great river that made its way from the mountains to the sea. In some places it rushed and gurgled. In others it flowed like a deep green ribbon, winding its silky way through forests and valleys. All sorts of animals and birds lived along the river's path. Heron and Hummingbird were good friends, even though they were very different, both in looks and in character. Hummingbird was a tiny bundle of color, full of fun. He spent his days flitting from place to place, catching a little silver fish here, sipping sweet nectar from a flower there, chasing sunbeams and bumblebees. Heron was bigger and slower and quieter. She sat for hours at a time, deep in thought, occasionally swooping down to scoop a fish from the river in her great bill. One long hot summer, when there had been no rain for weeks and weeks, the river began to dry up. The muddy banks were cracked and dry, and the fish became fewer and fewer. Hummingbird said to Heron, "I'm not sure there are enough fish in the river for both of us. We must have a race to decide who is going to own the fish that are left." Heron thought for a moment and said, "We'll race to the tall tree just before the waterfall. It will take all day." They agreed to start at dawn the following morning. Whoever was sitting at the top of the tree by sunset would own all the fish in the river. Hummingbird said to himself, "I'm sure I will win. I may be small, but I'm fast, and I can zip and flit around as quick. I'm going to enjoy this." As the sun rose next morning, the two birds perched on a rock in the middle of the river. News of their race had got around, and all the other animals and birds were out to cheer them on and shout encouragement. Heron stretched her great wings in the sun and thought about the journey ahead. Hummingbird was impatient to set off, and, as the first beam of the rising sun lit the water, both birds rose into the air. Heron flapped steadily and patiently, her long legs trailing behind and her neck craned forward. Hummingbird zipped past her, singing, "You'll have to go faster than that, my friend. Look at the speed I'm doing." And indeed, Hummingbird had got off to a fine start. He sped along, a bright ball of green and blue feathers, iridescent in the morning sunshine. As the sun rose higher in the sky, Hummingbird, well ahead, looked over his shoulder and sniggered. "Look at old Heron flapping like a broken teepee. I'm just going to nip down and take a little refreshment from those hibiscus flowers at the water's edge." Down he sped, hovering in front of the beautiful flowers and drinking deep from their delicious nectar. Heron flew on, following the wide green band of the river and feeling the heat of the sun on her back. After a while, she saw a flash of green and blue flitting in and out of the flowers on the bank far below. She smiled to herself as she overtook Hummingbird and continued her stately progress. Hummingbird, realizing that Heron was now in the lead, quickly flew ahead and overtook her on the bend of the river. But not long after that, he met some butterflies, and since Heron was again so far behind, he stayed a while to dance and play. And so they continued all day long. First Hummingbird took the lead before being distracted by pretty flowers full of nectar or friends calling up to him. Then Heron overtook him, and eventually Hummingbird caught up. The shadows grew longer, and Hummingbird began to feel tired. He glanced over his shoulder. No sign of poor old Heron. "She's doing her best, but I don't think I need to worry," he said to himself. He stopped to rest in a willow tree. He was so full of sweet nectar that he grew sleepy, and before long he dozed off, his tiny green head drooping to his breast. As dusk began to fall, Heron flapped past him. the long, even strokes of her great wings pulling her on and on. The sun began to sink behind the mountain, and a little breeze sprang up and ruffled Hummingbird's feathers. He stretched and opened one eye. "Oh, well," he thought, "I suppose I'd better go and win this race." He sprang into the air, refreshed and full of life, and zip-zipped around the last curve in the river toward the tall tree. Imagine his surprise as he rounded the bend and saw Heron sitting sleek and calm at the very top of the tree. "Well, good evening, my friend," she said. "What kept you?" Ever since that day, Heron has owned all the fish in the river, big and small, and Hummingbird, he drinks only the nectar from the flowers on the bank.